While not used much in the United States, metal-studded football boots are a huge part of football, and I would even argue a major part of football culture. The SG stands for soft ground, and they're meant to be worn on grass football pitches, so you don't want to wear them on a dry grass pitch if it's been hot out all day and no rain for a couple of days. You don't want to wear them on turf either. That's extremely dangerous. And really, they just provide a better grip and a lot more traction when you're playing on a wet pitch, so you're not sliding all over the place. These happen to be a pair of Vapor 15 Elite SG Pros, and they're one of the most common pairs of boots worn by professional players today. So I've done 2 reviews already with the Superfly 9 and the Vapor 15 Elite and their Air Zoom sole plate. So this is almost the same sole plate. It has a lot of similarities, except obviously it just has metal studs, so it still has a decent amount of those plastic molds on top of the metal screw and studs. Now, the Air Zoom unit itself in this boot is just a little air pocket if you haven't already seen these, and I believe they're keeping it with the Vapor 16 that is coming soon, but in my opinion, it's one of the only really undesirable things about this boot. I do not like that cushiony feel. It feels like your foot's raised a couple millimeters, which again is the point, but I just don't really like that. I feel a lot of the times that I'm a little bit disconnected when I start to notice that when I'm pushing down or when I'm running in my boots, I can really feel my foot drop just slightly on that Air Zoom unit. And it's supposed to provide cushioning and extra comfort, and while it does provide that cushioning, I don't think it really provides the comfort that I personally like in football boots. And in my opinion, if I were to go for comfort with something like the insole, I guess is where this is kind of going to be affected the most, I would just put a thicker padded insole instead of adding this Air Zoom unit. With the metal studs, I didn't really find any sort of stud pressure, and I've never really had stud pressure from metal boots because there's really no reason for you to. So a lot of the time stud pressure happens is because you're playing on a harder packed surface, and you can really just feel the feedback of the studs. They're not sinking in, so they're kind of stuck where they're going, and then your foot presses into it from the top. So that's really how stud pressure happens. When you're playing with an SG boot, the ground is super soft. It's very, very forgiving, and I would even argue it's a little bit cushiony, if you can call it that. And so when you're sinking your foot all the way in on a wet pitch, there's gonna be no real feedback from the studs because the studs are allowed to go in as deep as you press your foot into the ground. So you'll never really feel that stud pressure. At least this is how I've kind of felt and experienced stud pressure. So maybe you have it completely differently, but that's kind of how I viewed it, and I got no real stud pressure or feedback from these boots. Now, as for their performance, do metal studs really make a difference? I say yes, and I do think that you can wear regular FG boots on wet grass. There's tons of pros who do it. Most people don't own a pair of soft ground boots because 1, they're a bit more expensive, and 2, how often in the United States are we really playing on wet grass pitches anymore? But I do think that owning a pair of soft ground boots will help you a little bit, at least from slipping in most situations. Now, if you don't know how soft ground boots work, is essentially the metal studs sit a little bit longer than FG studs do, so they dig into the ground deeper. They're also just more circular and a little bit cone shaped, so they really just dig down deep in there. And what that allows the boot to do is it sinks deeper around a couple of just metal studs. There's always 6 metal studs on a pair of standard issue SG boots or SG Pro issued boots. And those areas are dug in. They're not spread out across the entire area of the boot, and it allows for less points of contact to kind of push yourself through the ground. If that makes sense. I'm no scientist or engineer, so that's the best way I can explain it. So that's all I have for the SG sole plate on this boot. I just wanted to kind of make this sort of about SG boots and then also about the Vapor 15 Elite in SG, because I just feel like a lot of people don't know enough about metal studded boots. They're just not that popular in the United States, and I haven't done a video on these before. I haven't reviewed a pair of metal studded boots before, like a full review. So with that being said, we're gonna move on to the upper. This upper is made of the Vaporposit Plus material. I think it's the new version of Nike Skin. In fact, it is the new version of Nike Skin. It's very, very similar. It has the same kind of textured feel. And although it is a little bit slippery, you get used to it pretty quickly. This boot also has the standard issue one-piece knit upper that 90% of football boots have these days. And I do like Nike's one-piece knit uppers. I feel like they do the job that a one-piece knit upper is supposed to do, and that's just no tongue and help the boot wrap around your foot. And these did just that. Now, I do like striking a ball in these boots, but I have to say my favorite thing about these boots is how they look on feet. I'm very, very weird when it comes to looking down at my feet and seeing how football boots look, or how they come across. I don't know. It's a very strange, like, tick, or I guess ick of mine. And the Vapor 15 is one of the best looking boots on the market currently, aesthetically. Just the silhouette of it. Some of the colorways aren't as great. Like, this is kind of a out there colorway, don't get me wrong, but I do like how these boots look on feet a lot. They really do the job for me. And overall, the upper's good. Nothing crazy, but definitely kind of on par with what Nike produces. For the comfort of this boot, it has some of that internal heel padding that most boots have these days. It doesn't run the entire length of the inside of the heel cup, which I always prefer because it's just nice to have something soft and plush back there, but they still have some of it. This boot is not something I would consider a comfort boot or like a control boot, which control boots are typically more comfortable. It is a speed boot at the end of the day. So the number one thing that any brand is doing with their speed boots is trying to make them as light but as durable as possible. And durable's a relative term for these brands, but they're supposed to be very light and perform in a way that most wingers would like. So that's what they do. And just because I said winger doesn't mean it's a winger boot, but a lot of the times your faster, more attacking players are going to be wearing speed boots. So the sacrifice is a little bit of comfort, sometimes a lot of comfort for speed boots, but on top of their air zoom unit, which is supposed to really bring some of that comfort, I just feel like it's there, but it doesn't really make the boot more comfortable. I would say it's an average boot, but being a speed boot, you're kind of gonna get what you get with them. For sizing, I went with my 9 US. It's what I get with pretty much any boot that I'm wearing, and it fit, about as good as it could fit. I felt like it was pretty snug. They're a more narrow boot, but most speed boots are, so just be aware of that if you have wider feet and haven't worn a Vapor before. But even though it's a different, I guess they're called last, like shape of the boot overall, it fits like a normal Vapor. I haven't worn the 12, 13, or 14. I've only worn the 9, 10, 11, and the 15, but those 4 models have basically all fit the same. So if you're curious about sizing, I think you'll be okay with getting your normal size in Nike Vapors or Nike boots in general. So for me to say after 4 wears exactly how durable these are is really, really tough, but so far so good. And typically you'll see a lot more retro SG boots out there on people who are actually wearing their boots. And that's mostly because you don't really have a need to buy SG boots as much as you do FG in America. So maybe this is completely different for the rest of the world, but we don't really need to buy them as much. So durability, I don't think you're gonna have to worry about ripping these anytime soon, and you'll probably have your SG pair for at least a few years, so make sure you're picking wisely so you're not just stuck with the pair you hate. Earlier, I didn't mention the price, but typically for SG boots, you're gonna see a price of the base retail model and then a little extra. So I know back in the day with the Superfly 4s, they were running, I wanna say $275, and then you would have to pay $300 for the SG version. And the Magistas were a bit more, I think they were $315 for the SG. So typically, the Vapor 15 runs $250 to $260. I believe these run retail, I want to say $290, $280, close to $300. I got these much, much cheaper and didn't have to pay anywhere near that. But you're going to be around retail and then add $20, $30 for price. So overall, I know this video was more educational than it was a legitimate review, but technically all these reviews are educational, so maybe you just learned a bit more history than normal. But I think that you should get a pair of SG boots. I'm always somebody who believes in having a sole plate for each surface. And SG boots aren't going to hurt you. Now, do be careful. Don't buy into the Brexit mentality and the Wayne Rooney of putting longer studs in to hurt people, because that's not why I'm saying wear SG boots. I think they definitely will help your performance. They'll prevent a lot more slipping. Will you still slip? Maybe, especially if you're playing on a more muddy pitch and there's only so much metal studs can do at that point. But for the most part, I think that you would benefit from purchasing a pair of these. There's tons and tons of them on eBay for cheap, slightly used. So if you don't want to buy a brand new model, look for something else. Look for something on eBay. Find a cheaper SG boot. Look up SG football boots or SG soccer cleats or wherever you are, and I think you'll find what you're looking for. The Vapor 15 itself is a decent speed boot. It's one of the most common speed boots on the market right now, and it's one of the most common boots you'll see in the professional game. And would I wear this boot all the time? Probably not. I was definitely tempted to throw the FG version into my rotation, but there's just other boots to wear personally for me. But if you're a big speed boot person, I think you'll really enjoy the Vapor 15 Elite itself. For a more in-depth review, I would definitely recommend watching my Vapor 15 Elite FG version, because that is just about the boot itself, not about SG boots and the history of SG boots. And if you were looking to buy the Vapor 15 Elite and you watch this video and weren't expecting the SG stuff, make sure to check out that FG video. I think it's gonna give you a lot more in-depth information than this video would. So that's all I have for you guys today. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Please make sure to subscribe. It really helps the channel out. It helps it grow. If you love football boots and you like football boot reviews, or more history or stuff like this, make sure to check out the rest of the channel. There's tons of videos out there and a lot of them are pretty cool. So with that, I will see you guys in the next review.